Okay, the recording's going.
This is what happens with this. Right? I'll get up there. It'll be fun. Job done. So what are you going to do if you hang on to the suspended ceiling? Because that'll just the things that we do. Oh my God. One of the things, I mean, there's this, and some people have a tweak or someone else has a voice. And, you know, when it vice versa, the other person's experience is only sharing the stories, you start to go, I've never done that, or you maybe. Oh, I know all the time. We had that well,
10 after? Do you want to leave it a few
We
minutes?
can wait for a few more minutes, because I've got, like, mine
Yeah.
will take 45 minutes maximum.
Yeah.
And then still, we've got lots of time. So.
Okay, that's good. All right, folks, we're going to, we'll wait a few more minutes, make sure that we can get a few more people in here. I know we kind of ran a little bit late. The Premier has some good words for us. Can you hear me okay? Nice wave at the back. There we go. Good. So just be patient with us and, you know, grab a water or whatever it is. I know that once we get going, you'll enjoy Gord's presentation. And even if you are starting to nod off a little bit, he's pretty enthusiastic. So I think you'll stay quite awake. So, but just give us a few more minutes and we'll get started here shortly. So thanks. Yeah, that's funny. I run into so many people after a while. That's what it is. You know, I've never tried to mix the two. It just is the way it is. So.
But you know, it's too, when you see a person in full context, I know, and on council, it wasn't until the December 6th presentation that,
Well, I got elected the first time. I mean, I had no idea what I was getting into, so I went and got myself elected. And all of a sudden, I ran into all these people from all the lines. I was like, no, I can't believe it. Because we have about 800 clients, and so you don't realize after a while. But I spent 15 years in financial planning as well, so I have a whole raft of people I know from that. My city council, now our insulation business, and of course the trees. So I can easily get confused trying to figure out how I know some of these. And then, you know, it's only one reason I know them, but they may know me for multiple reasons because of what I do.
but you know, what I find is, I've got, taking the RBA president to Whitmore Park, my, it's like, he knows everybody in that restaurant. I haven't been there for 2.5 or 3 years because we didn't need, we got a new validated servicing, we got one, we get gas one time. And this is 2.5 years, I haven't seen Mike, I walk in the door, go on. He, what helps him is that he sees people's records on kind of electronic records. And walk in my name, looking at it.
So I can tell you where every single tree is that we've ever done in the yard. So I can tell you about a yard, I can tell you where the tree was and where it is and everything in that yard. And Laura can tell you your wife's name, your kid's name, so that you may even know your street address and be able to bring it over. Because that's what she does, and so she knows people that way. We've been in aircraft sitting there waiting for the plane to take off. People are coming on, and somebody walks by, and she'll say, "Hi, so and so." Who? No, I don't know who they are, but she knows. So you might say, "I'm kidding." The guy walks by just freaked out because she'll pick them out and recognize it. So some people have different strengths, but yeah, Laura runs into people all the time, and she knows their names, and she knows them. But she sees the paperwork, so the check shows up. There's and so she's been doing it for 25 years. So there's that recognition that comes in. So if she meets them once, she can attribute who that is. And it's freaky that she can do that. But Laura would be at a function event. Who's that? It's pretty remote. You know, not that bad, but to that point that she'll help me figure out who somebody is because it's interesting.
What I'm finding helps is when I see somebody, I think, I know who they work for.
That helps too.
All of a sudden,
It's the same thing, actually. Every time I get a call from somebody, if I don't know the number, I put it on. So I have about 3,000 contacts on my phone. But it's surprising how often, if I do need to find somebody, I'll scroll through there, and that's who it is.
yes,
That happens.
because you can always have some association.
Yeah.
Can get rings.
Well, we were at a funeral, I was looking at all the people in the room, and I know so many people. Who is that? That's Rich Howard, okay, that's what it is. Now, he's not with Cooperative anymore, but that's how I find him. Well, we picked up. Well, folks, thanks very much for your patience, and we'll go ahead and get the show on the road. Just chatting with Gord up here, and his presentation isn't as long as the time we have allotted, so there's a bit of room at the end for questions, and so we'll go ahead and get started right away. I'm Wade Murray. I'm a city councillor here in Regina, and actually in Ward 6, which is where you are right now. So this is Ward 6, so you're in Wade's ward, so party on, Wade's ward. I can tell the age of the crowd by that one, because some of you guys are too young for that. The whole session is being recorded as well, so when you do want to ask a question, please come up to the microphone that's right in the center here and make sure you speak clearly into it, because we want to make sure that when this presentation is available online, that everyone can hear your question if you're asking it of the presenters. So thanks very much for your understanding on that. I want to quickly introduce our speaker today, and that's Gord Mocker from Mission Zero. Gord's Chief Executive Officer for Safe Saskatchewan. He was born and raised in Waukesha, Saskatchewan, and demonstrates a daily passion and commitment to moving the vision of an injury-free Saskatchewan forward. As a former president of Mocker Farms Products Limited, Gord refined his leadership skills and learning about the workings of businesses. While Gord was a manager with Continental Bank of Canada, he served industry and commercial customers in Saskatchewan and Alberta and became proficient in understanding the financial challenges facing enterprises. Gord is extremely familiar with the injury prevention world, having worked with Saskatchewan Workers' Compensation Board for 15 years. With this WCB, he led a team that managed the annual premium rate setting process, an employer experience rating programs, and research function. Gord's also trained in process design by Hammer & Company, a world leader in process and design education and steering business processes and engineering initiatives at the Saskatchewan Workers' Compensation Board. Today, Gord continues to aid in the steady forward movement of Mission Zero, transforming our province culture and positioning injury prevention as a core value. Please help me welcome Gord.
Well, thanks very much, Wade, and thanks for the opportunity to be with you here this afternoon. I had an opportunity to present to SUMA board back in the early part of December and made the connection between Wade as Councillor Wade and Wade, the guy who does our trees, vans our trees at home, and so we got into a conversation here. So it's Old Home Week in Wade's ward. Wade's ward. Got it. So I'm here today to ask for your help in putting an end to our unintentional injury epidemic. We have an epidemic of injuries that is expanding outside of our workplace into our communities throughout the province. We have the second highest workplace injury rate in Canada, behind Manitoba. But when we take a look at all injuries at work, at home, and play on our farms and ranches and on our road system, we have the highest overall rates in Canada. I'm asking your help through membership in the Saskatchewan Health and Safety Leadership Charter, which I'll talk a little bit more about later on in my presentation. But I'm also asking your help to believe that the only acceptable number of injuries at work, at home, at play on our farms and ranches is 0. And together, we'll take on Mission Zero, and we will put an end to the pain and suffering that's seen in every aspect and in every corner of our great province. Safe Saskatchewan is a nonprofit organization, so I'm here from the perspective of an individual who's working in partners to work together to put an end to our epidemic. There you see all of our strategic partners, all of our funding partners from the public, private, cooperative, and nonprofit sector. All of these organizations and their leaders have invested in the health and safety of the people of the province through a strategic partnership in Safe Saskatchewan. Our vision is an injury-free Saskatchewan where safe lifestyles influence how we live, work, and play. Every hour of every day in our great province, 18 people are injured. By the end of today, 435 people will be injured. 26 of those people will end up in the hospital. 10 will suffer a permanent disability. And 1 person will die, perhaps a child. We estimate that there are about 158,000 injuries to Saskatchewan people every year. About 40,000 of those injuries occur in Saskatchewan workplaces, and the remaining 120,000 injuries occur to seniors, mostly from falls, to children, and to working-class Saskatchewan people like you and I after we're done work. As a matter of fact, you'll see that it's far safer to stay in Saskatchewan workplaces than it is to go home and work on a project at home or to travel with our families on the weekends. That's an injury every 3.5 minutes. And while our population represents about 3.5% of Canada's population. We carry about 7.5% of all the injuries in Canada. You may have seen the article in the Star Phoenix and Leader Post last week about how we have the highest preventable fatalities in the country. We know we have the highest days of sick days in the country. We know we have the highest death rates when it comes to heart disease and other diseases and illnesses. But the thing about injury is that injuries are preventable. And we don't have to see a person every day dying from a preventable injury in our great province. It's estimated that about 40% of emergency room visits come about as a result of a person who's had a preventable injury. So think about that. The next time you have occasion to visit an emergency room, of 10 people there, 4 or 5 are there because they've had a preventable injury. Think about the potential of preventing injuries in the first place and how much better our healthcare system would be and how much more quickly people could get into diagnosis, treatment, and surgery for heart disease, cancer, stroke, and all those other disabling illnesses and diseases. The potential is there. It's just at our fingertips. Close to 10,000 hospitalizations every year from preventable injuries in our province, and our hospitalization rate is twice the national average. And by the end of 2014, the lives of 3,500 people and their families will change forever because they've been permanently disabled from a preventable injury. And almost a death a day. 330 to 350 deaths from preventable injuries. Now, if we had 330 deaths from the H1N1 virus, there'd be panic and pandemonium. We've already had, last count, I think 16. But can you imagine 330? But yet we have 330 preventable deaths from injuries, and we seem to take it in stride and say, well, this is part of everyday life in the province. Of 330 fatalities, about 140 to 150 occur on Saskatchewan road systems every year. People still make the choice either not to buckle up or to drink and drive, or a combination of both. The root cause for over a third of motor vehicle collisions is driver distraction or driver inattention. And by the way, a study out of the University of Calgary in 2007 said that whether you're using a handheld or a hands-free cell phone, the decreases in reaction time is the same. They've determined, the University of Calgary has, that it's not the fact that you're using a handheld cell phone that's the hazard. It's the fact that you're engaged in a conversation. You're focused. And you watch somebody who's on the cell phone and you'll see their eyes may be looking ahead, but they're not really familiar with what's going on around them. So can you imagine putting yourself in a predicament? And I refuse to use my cell phone on the road. I've got voicemail. If I'm expecting a call, I'll pull over. Because I can't bear to think what would happen if I was on my cell phone and I was going through one of the school zones in the city here and a child jumped out from the curb and I was responsible for serious injury or death to that child and their family. I couldn't bear to think how I would feel. I know I couldn't live with myself. We don't value injury prevention in our province, and here's an opportunity to hold injury prevention as a core value with every community in the province and every citizen living in every community throughout the province. There's a real opportunity to do some wonderful work right here in our communities. In Saskatchewan, I talked about this earlier, there's twice the chance that you or I will have an injury when we're done work today, 4 times the chance that we'll suffer a permanent disability, and 5 times the chance that we'll die from a preventable injury after we're done our work shifts today. Does safety stop at 5 o'clock? You bet it does. We've done some really good things in the workplace around preventing injuries, and we've seen the workplace injury rate come down from its all-time high in 2002 to its all-time low as of the end of the year last year. Employers, employees, healthcare providers, workers' compensation, OH&S, all working together to prevent injuries in the first place, but then where an injury does occur, to try and end the pain and suffering by alternate duties and modified duties and getting that person back to meaningful employment when it's proper to do so. But you know what? And I'm as guilty as anybody. I used to be, not anymore. Well, we'll think nothing of putting on our personal protective equipment at work and following all the regulations, get home, put on our shorts and our sandals, and cut the lawn. We'll think nothing of taking a snowmobile safety course, putting a helmet on, and following all the rules and regulations and all the safety precautions in the snow machines, but yet come spring, get on a quad without a helmet and maybe put a child on that seat in front of us. I used to do a co-presentation with Bruce Fraser from Mosaic Potash of the Clonsey mine site years ago. Bruce is now in Ontario, and he's passionate about injury prevention. And we were in Weyburn presenting at the Southeast Environmental Safety Seminar. And I'd present the same presentation that I'm giving you here today, and then Bruce came on. And he said, how many of, there was about 200 people, mostly from the oil and gas sector, how many of you have got a fire evacuation procedure at work? And everybody in the room put up their hands. And then he said, how many of you have maybe done a fire drill in the last, 3 weeks to a month? And quite a few people put up their hands. And Bruce was silent for a few minutes, and he said, how many of you have got a fire evacuation procedure at home? And 3 people in that room, not myself, but 3 people in that room of 200 people put up their hand. Andy. He says, isn't that odd? At home with the people we love, we can't take a few minutes and have fun to do a fire evacuation procedure, but we'll think nothing of doing it at work. There's been some great things done in the workplace in terms of preventing injuries. Let's just take it past 5 o'clock and talk about it with our families at home. Let's embrace the philosophy of Mission Zero and that the only acceptable number of injuries at work, at home, at play is 0. I own Mission Zero. Please think about owning Mission Zero yourself. Because at the end of the day, we can save lives right here in our community. We don't have to go elsewhere. And better the quality of life for everybody in the province. A conservative estimate of the cost of preventable injuries to our economy is $1 billion a year. Now, the Ministry of Health's annual operating budget a couple years ago, that's our largest ministry, was just over $3 billion. Think about the potential of preventing injuries and reducing the economic burden by just 10%. That's annual savings to our province of $100 million. We have about 9,200 registered nurses in the province. $100 million is the equivalent of 1,000 registered nurses who could now devote their time from tending to injury victims to providing that quality care for people suffering with heart disease, cancer, stroke, diabetes, and all those other disorders and illnesses. We wouldn't see any lineups for treatment, diagnosis, and surgery. We wouldn't. And the people providing the care in our healthcare system would work towards relieving the stress that they face every day when they do a 12-hour shift. You can pick up the paper every day and you will see either an article about a person injured or people injured or the pressure on our healthcare system. A month back, the closure of the emergency room in one of the hospitals here after so many hours. Who's going to take on that additional stress but the other hospital? You know, injury prevention is the answer. And it's going to be the answer, and it has to be the answer for managing the growth ahead of us. It just has to be. Now, this isn't an exact science, but $1,000, $1 billion is the equivalent of $1,000 in an economic burden for every man, woman, and child in the province. So now let's take a look at the pressure on our healthcare system. Saskatoon Health Region, 300,000 population and growing. This is probably 2 years ago. They're probably closer to 320, I don't know. We're growing as a province. Would carry, on average, an annual economic burden of $300 million. The operating budget for the Saskatoon Health Region, $912 million. Look at the pressure preventable injuries are having on the healthcare system. Now, what about our growth? The city of Humboldt, a couple years ago, population 6,500 people. They are looking at an influx of economic activity around the mine site in Jansen, right? As a matter of fact, it's said that in our mining industry, over the next few years, we're going to have to double the workforce from, I think it's 15,000 where it currently is, to 30,000. And that'll be seen in Humboldt, and it'll be seen halfway between Moose Jaw and Regina, K+S, and Vallée. They're all expanding. What about the economic pressure in Humboldt, though? Getting back to square one, $6.5 million based on their population of 6,500, which is old. It's grown since then. And their operating budget, $9.8 million. Huge in terms of potential opportunities to save costs and get back to an economy that's vibrant and is able to manage the growth ahead of us. I want to take you through the evolution of a claim in the workplace to the potential now of an injury that happens outside of the workplace to the workplace. So these are the costs that are impacting your municipalities right now. In 2009, the WCB annual report cited $12,000 as the average cost of a time loss claim. Now, these are costs such as medical costs, wage loss costs. There could be retraining costs. And those are paid. You pay WCB premiums. Your municipalities do. And regardless of the cost of that claim, it could be a $200,000 costing claim. You don't have to pay the $200,000. Your premiums may go up or down based on your cost history. So that's primarily what you have been looking at is your premiums right now. But depending on who you talk to, the ratio of indirect costs to direct WCB costs could be anywhere from $4 to $12 for every $1 of WCB costs. And those are seen in such things as overtime, downtime, damage to property and equipment. When you have a person working in the process line, working to service your customers in the municipalities, and that person is injured, you probably have to bring somebody else in. You probably have to ask everybody else to work overtime. In the case of a long-term injury, you may have to rehire somebody. And human resource specialists will tell you that it costs 3 times annual salary to hire, train, and bring a person up to the capacity that they need to be in to perform the duties properly of the job. 3 times annual salary. So, salary of $50,000 a year, it's going to cost your municipalities $150,000 to retrain, to train, and bring everybody up to snuff. And I've checked with HR professionals. They will tell you, yeah, 2.5, 3 times, you're not far off. Now think if you've invested those already, train somebody up to snuff. They've been there for 2 years. Maybe a longer-term baby boomer who is well experienced and provides all that good knowledge and quality to the job that they perform Now they're injured, and all that investment is for naught. Not only that, you've got to double up because you've got to train somebody else, right? But indirect costs, conservative, will cost your municipalities on one claim $50,000. Okay, so the total cost of a claim, $61,000, but it's this for $48,000, $50,000 that's hitting your bottom line, your expenses over time. If you were for a profit business, it would take an additional $815,000 in sales at a profit margin of 6% to recover those costs of $50,000. This is huge. Well, now let's take a look at a serious claim. One of our partners is K-Line Maintenance and Construction. Actually, Jim Kellett, the Senior Vice President for K-Line, when we were in business, I ran a family business in Waka, took over from my dad and my grandfather before him. K-Line was doing some work in Waka. And I got to know the K-Line crew. This is back in the early 80s. So then when I met Jim, I talked about a couple of the guys, Wilf and Murray, and he says, yeah, those guys, and we talked about, and Dean from Cudworth. It was like old home week. So K-Line is one of our strategic partners. Here's an example of a serious workplace injury. Now this happened in Ontario, so I have to qualify that legislation is different in Ontario around OH&S than it is in Saskatchewan, than it is in Alberta, and so on. But this will give you an example of the worst case scenario relative to a workplace injury. K-Line calculated the costs on that one claim. This was a lineman, a young fellow who fell off the pole and broke his arm. So a serious enough injury, but it could have been far worse. Their direct cost calculation, $262,000. Their indirect costs, $2.27 million. This is one claim. $2.27 million, one serious injury for a total of $2.5 million. This young man was off work for 180 days. K-Line, in order to recover that loss, and it's not loss, it's invested in injury, but it doesn't have to be, at a profit margin of 6%, K-Line would have to come up with an additional $37.8 million in sales to cover costs of $2.27 million. So, I read this statistic about 5 or 6 years ago, and I was really shocked. Because I thought that whether a person was injured in the workplace or away from the workplace, the cost to the workplace would be the same. But we're discovering now that isn't the case. As a matter of fact, it is clear that the cost of injuries that occur off the job are quite a bit higher to the workplace. That's why it's so important that we embrace injury prevention 24/7. And not only in the workplace, but after work with our employees in each of the communities that we represent here. 8 times more costly. So can you imagine now we got $2.5 million, one serious claim, 8 times that, millions and millions of dollars for one injury? Now we think this is the case because we don't have off the job what we do have in the workplace. In the workplace we've got WCB, OH&S, employees, employers, healthcare providers, all working together to prevent injuries in the first place and then mitigate the losses that occur and have a person back to meaningful employment as soon as it's proper to do so. But more often than not, when a person is seriously injured after work, he or she is forgotten. If that person is fortunate enough to have disability insurance, after a certain point in time, the disability insurer will say, I'm sorry, after X many days, we're going to have to cut you off. Now, I couldn't bear to think how I would feel if I was that person, getting that message from my insurer saying, you know, Gord, yes, you've had a serious injury and we understand, but in 30 days or 15 days, you're not going to get any more from us in terms of providing. And can you imagine what is going through the person's head? How can I provide for my family? How am I going to provide for my community? And research has shown that the worst case scenario happens when there's a serious injury, and it eventually leads to family breakup, divorces, and a breaking of the core of what we're living for, and that's our family. And speaking of family, you know, I used to be like this, but I'm not anymore. I look out the window. We live in Regina here in Whitmore Park. And I look out the window and I see a family go biking by. And I see more often than not the kids are wearing their bike helmets and the parents aren't. And I say, man, that was me as a parent not too long ago. But you know what? What if that dad fell off his bike and had a serious brain injury? How could he provide for his family? And then I think, you know, the greatest gift we could give our kids and our grandkids is that of an example. So think about that the next time you go biking with your family or take your grandkids out for a look in the field or whatever it is. Our kids and our grandkids are watching us all the time. And the greatest gift we could give them, and it doesn't have to do a lot. It could be the simple step of taking that pair of boots on the top landing to the stairs and setting them aside so that nobody trips and falls. It could be putting on that bike helmet and going for a bike ride with the family. It could mean, you know what? Everybody buckles up before we head out on the road. So, I talked a little bit about the impact of off-the-job injuries to industry, to your municipalities as a business. Mosaic Potash is one of our strategic partners. They looked at the number of days that they lost to workplace injuries and compared that to the number of days they lost to injuries that occurred away from their workplace. In a 12-month period, now this is their potash business unit. This is 4 mines here in Saskatchewan. We've got 2 in Estevan, Esterhazy, one in Kalonze, and one just outside of town here, one in New Mexico and one in Michigan. 2,500 workers in total. And interesting, I was at the Sun Country Health Region in Weyburn presenting to their leadership team, and one of the vice presidents said to me, well, we have about 2,200 workers in our health region. And I said, I'm glad you mentioned that because our sense is that what you're about to see with Mosaic Potash case study is going to be quite the same, regardless of the industry that you're in, whether you're in forestry, healthcare, mining, construction. As a matter of fact, we're going back to our strategic partners, that group that I showed you on the first slide, and we're asking them to go and research their off-the-job injury statistics. And we're asking them, is that ratio that we see with Mosaic close? And they're coming back and they're saying, yeah, it is. So, this is 12 months of Mosaic's fiscal year, just 12-month period. In that time frame, they lost 100 days to workplace injuries and 6,100 days to injuries that occurred to their employees after work. This does not include their sick time. An additional 14,000 days of sickness would be added on top of the 6,100 days. 20,000 days total either lost to off-the-job injuries, preventable injuries, or sickness. Their VP said, so if we have on average 200 people work, or 200 days a year that a person works, 20,000 days is the equivalent of a small mine of 100 people out of commission for an entire year. And all of a sudden, it really made sense. And you know, 2,500 workers, the heart and soul of Saskatchewan is made up of small business. If we have 35,000 employers registered with the WCB, 28,000 of them are small businesses. And they're thriving in every community throughout our province. And if this is actually even more appropriate and more meaningful for small business in Saskatchewan. I can't think, like, you know, the only reason that I wasn't injured or some of the team at Moker's Farm Products back in the 80s weren't injured is just a matter of luck. I just think about the potential if one of our long-term employees was seriously injured and couldn't return to work. And all of our employees were ambassadors for Mocha's Farm Products. What about if I would have been injured? Potentially, it could have been an end to a third-generation family business. One serious injury. Plus, think about the negative impact and the pain and suffering for my family and the community. No longer able to employ 7 or 8 young people and a couple of long-term experienced workers. 6,100 days is the equivalent of 30 person years. Oh, and by the way, regardless of the size of an employer, 2,500 workers or 100 workers at business, your municipalities are really made up of smaller working teams. 8, 10, 12 people working on a team, right? Could be 3 or 4. One person injured immediately puts stress on the others that are put in place now to carry on the service demands of your community. And stress manifests itself in sick days, and some people just don't handle stress very well, and they get physically ill. We have Conference Board of Canada statistic released a couple months ago says that on average, we have a person in Canada has 9.5 sick days. Saskatchewan has the highest rate of sick days at 11 days a year. So a lot of this has got to be connected to injuries and the stress that that puts on the workforce, on our families, and then creates additional sick days. And we're all looking at those sick days and what we can do about them. Here's an opportunity. In Mosaic's case, this is conservative. Their costs, $1.5 million in direct costs, $6 million in indirect costs, $7.5 million in total. For every day of disability, just under $1,200 or just over $1,200. And if they wanted to get back to square one at a profit margin of 6%, Mosaic would have to sell an additional $100 million in product. So here's where the good news is coming into shape. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control say, for instance, that if you spend $1 on a smoke alarm, you'll save $69. That's a 6,900% return on investment. There's a 2,900% return on investment. There's a 3,200%. There's a 300% return on investment. And this is real. I've worked with the health regions in putting together business cases years back when we worked with them on the Seniors Fall strategy. And time again, we have proven returns on investment, minimum 300% and upwards of 1,500% returns on investment. And you know what? We are making those investments in the workplace. And we are starting to see the workplace injury rate come down, but we sure aren't at home. As a matter of fact, I know of a fella, me, who put a stepladder on top of a kitchen table to get up to the roof. And it was too late by the time I got up there. Then I started assessing my hazards. And I jumped off the roof into the snow because I figured that was the safest way down. I mean, we've all done those things. I don't do that anymore. I pay a roofing company who's qualified to do the job to take the snow off the roof. It's the best investment of $150 that I could ask, that I could get. Because I know I'm keeping myself safe and away from harm for the sake of my family. And at the end of the day, if we don't look out after our own health and safety, how can we be good for our families? How can we be good for our coworkers? And how can we be good for those people we serve in our communities throughout this great province? You know, I had an interview with John Gormley this morning at 11 o'clock. And my comment was, you know, I think we are better at looking out after others' health and safety than we are of our own. And an example of that is our healthcare industry. Our healthcare industry's injury rate is twice the provincial average. And I think that's the way it is because people working in healthcare think nothing of putting themselves in harm's way for the sake of saving a patient from falling. And we see those injury rates go up. But we can't keep doing that. It's not selfish to look out after ourselves and prevent an injury to ourselves. It's not. As a matter of fact, I've heard it said that exposing yourself to injury is one of the most selfish things that anybody can do. And I'm beginning to know and understand more and more how true that is. How are we going to manage the growth ahead of us? The Premier talked about that this morning. We've got all kinds of challenges. We've got 30 to 40% of the workplace that's due to retire, if they choose to, within the next 4 or 5 years. Many of us are baby boomers in this room. What's going to happen to all that experience and all of that brain trust when we decide to leave the workforce? How are we going to keep the lights on in this province, let alone address the growth ahead of us? We're bringing people in from other countries, which is a wonderful thing, but what about the challenges around language and culture that's really jeopardizing our own health and safety? You know what? Some of those are well out of our control. But you know, preventing injuries is well within our control. And this, by Brett Wilson, a quote from his book, the most important asset you will ever have, and the one that appreciates the most, is the human capital you hire, develop, and retain. We're having struggles right now retaining a qualified, experienced workforce, aren't we? But yet, we do have experience and quality right within our own workforce. What better investment than to do what we can as community leaders to invest in our and their health and safety, both on and off the job. We are gathering in collaboration with others in the province to transform our culture and to position injury prevention as a core value. We have been working with our Ministry of Education. We have developed a community safety education strategy for our kids and our children and youth in the K-12 system. We're hoping that sometime within the next year we'll roll out that strategy, and then we'll be able to support our children and youth in leading the cultural transformation and positioning injury prevention as a core value. Because we know there's huge value in supporting our children to lead the change that's needed over the next 5, 10, 20 years. And the beauty about this strategy is that there's no other strategy like it in Canada. There really isn't. And the beauty about the strategy is that it extends the outcomes that the children are taught and learn around health and safety beyond the classroom, into the hallways, into the school grounds, and into the community. And we have the support of industry who've said to us, you know, when you need help purchasing resources, we'll be there. So the conditions are right. But I'd like to ask you today about a specific initiative that you can partake in as leaders in the community to help put an end to the injury epidemic. The Saskatchewan Health and Safety Leadership Charter. The inaugural event, the first annual event, was in June of 2010. We now have 341 business, government, union, and community leaders who have signed the charter and subscribed to the 7 principles of the charter. We have 5, City of Moose Jaw, Prince Albert, Humboldt, Saskatoon, and Regina, who signed the charter. What are the chances? Is there an opportunity, maybe this time next year, to have a resolution passed at your AGM and convention next year to have as many municipalities, cities, towns, villages, or hamlets sign the charter and endorse Mission Zero and help us put an end. This is a community at work. This is a province at work because there's a need to bring us all together. I've been working with Sean. I'll continue working with Laurent, your CEO. I've had discussions with your board, with your president and board. The best thing that could happen is a resolution right from the membership up. And we'll be there partnering with you and providing support that you need in the community to pass along the Mission Zero message. And at the same time, the importance of Mission Zero and our belief that the only acceptable number of injuries at work, at home, at play, on our farms and ranches, and on our road system is 0. Here are the 7 principles of the Charter that you'll be subscribing to, signing on to. Number 1, to subscribe to the principle that nothing is more important than the health, safety, and well-being of employees, contractors, clients, customers, visitors, and, I love this, if and whenever possible, the surrounding community. To integrate health and safety into business strategies, processes, and performance measures, and to recognize that good health and safety performance supports good business results. To effectively manage health and safety risks by eliminating, minimizing, or controlling hazards. To strive for continuous health and safety improvement, and to provide the leadership and internal capacity to make this happen. These are where the investments are so important. To provide an environment that enables all employees to participate and work collaboratively in developing, promoting, and improving health and safety at work. To extend, I love this one, to extend health and safety efforts if and whenever possible. Whenever you can do it, think about doing it beyond the workplace, recognizing and supporting related initiatives within the community. And I have to tell you, in traveling this province, there are a lot of great initiatives undertaken in the communities throughout the province. The city of Humboldt has Humboldt Safe Communities. Prince Albert has Prince Albert Safe Communities. Assiniboia has Assiniboia Safe Communities. There's lots of good community work undertaken in health and safety and preventing injuries, but they don't have the dollars to deliver those programs effectively. They need the bucks. And they will do very good in terms of making the best investment and the highest returns that investment can see in preventing injuries. And this is the last, and our responsibility as a big team, an entire team now, to participate within a health and safety leadership learning community by providing and receiving information and best practices with the goal of continuously improving health and safety strategies, programming, and performance. And so there's some good things happening here. 2 weeks ago, I had one of our charter signatories from Yorkton come up and say, you know what? In the fall, one of my friends got married. It was a cool morning, and the fertilizer had caked, or the grain, and he was overcome. He says, you know, I've talked to his widow, and I've asked her, would you mind if we gathered a group of people around and see what we could do to make sure that that doesn't happen again? And he approached me a couple of weeks ago. He says, would you like to help? And I said, I would love to help. As a matter of fact, this is what this is all about. A health and safety leadership learning community where there's a need. Let's gather our community leaders together and let's say, what do we need to do to put an end to this pain and suffering and this death? And it'll be different in every corner of the province. But you know what? We have this network of community leaders now. Do you know that 341 leaders whose organizations, the employees of their organizations and their families, represent about 300,000 people in the province who are directly or indirectly influenced by Mission Zero right now? Think about all of your communities. We got a population of 1.1 million. You know, in a year or two, we could have 1.1 million people all helping, all believing in Mission Zero. And you know what? Our investments go directly and immediately into our community. And the quality of life goes up. It's all about Mission Zero. And you know, WorkSafe Saskatchewan, one of our partners, they started off Mission Zero. It was a call to action about preventing injuries in the workplace. Now, it's a call to action about preventing injuries at work, at home, play, 24/7. It's really all about improving the lives of the people of the province, enhancing the economic environment for business, and saving millions of dollars in health and social costs. It's all about believing in Mission Zero so we can all live injury-free. Thank you very much for this opportunity. There you have my contact information. I'd be happy to sit down anytime over a coffee or lunch or a phone call just to see how we can work more closely together. But ultimately, it would be wonderful if we could work with you, if I could work with you, and we would see a resolution passed in a year from now so that we could broaden this partnership and this movement around Mission Zero. So with that, it's 2 o'clock. I'll throw it out to questions or any other comments that you might have.
My name is Dennis Dott, and I'm the mayor of Christopher Lake. My question to you is, would you, if this went further, would we have safety officers coming into the community? Like something like, you know, I work in a mine site when I'm not in the village. Yeah. So I work at a company called Arriva, yeah, which you know are very familiar with probably. And of course we have our safety officers, and they check out everything that's going on. Yeah. And last year we had a guy come in the village and he had a man lift, and of course somebody caught him with the man lift. Wasn't certified. He had guys on it with no fall arrest equipment, no training in fall arrest, no training on man lift. And I mean, the whole thing was shut down. Is that the kind of stuff you're looking to have implemented? Like, that's at work, but I mean, you know, it goes at work, goes play. I understand that. Yeah. Is that what you're looking to?
That could definitely be one aspect, and I'll give you an example of how that's being actually undertaken. This same gentleman who signed the charter that I talked 2 weeks ago, he's from Yorkton. He grew up in Saltcoats. They actually, there's a town outside of Saltcoats. They have, I don't know if they did it last year, but they have this huge Christmas light display. And they insist, it's actually EMW Industrial insists that they put up the Christmas lights because they do it safely.
That would be a good question to ask. Also, how many people are hurt or injured hanging Christmas lights? That's honestly, I know one guy was killed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really?
So I'll give you a sense of where the injuries are occurring. If you envision a pie, the biggest piece of the pie are falls. And most of those falls, many of them happen to our seniors falls. The next biggest piece of the falls pie are falls from playground equipment for our children aged 5 to 9. Motor vehicle collisions are the next biggest piece. We talk, I think I mentioned 140 to 150 fatalities on our road systems every year. And then it's poisonings. And then there's an array of other injuries, sports injuries, the hanging the lights, the Christmas tree lights, and travel, around the home. So, but those are the kinds of things that when we get a community around Mission Zero partners, that we're going to be calling each other. It's no different than walking across to the neighbor and saying, hey, you know what? Why do you have that ladder on top of the kitchen table? No. Here, let's work together. I'll hold the ladder. I'll get a proper ladder. Don't even go up on the roof. Let's call ABC Roofing. So it's going to take us all working together. But I think the first thing is we have to look out after ourselves. And once we are confident that, then we've got to extend a hand to others. And you know, I've heard stories about, you'll see a person on a roof in work and he's not tied down. I think the regulations, I don't know a lot about regulations, says you have to, over 10 feet, you have to have the fall arrest equipment. And lots of stories about, hey, why haven't you got your fall arrest equipment? And you get flipped the bird. And you get a bunch of expletive deletas. What is it of your business? Well, it's my business because I care about your health and safety. And every year, 18 workers or so fall off roofs, primarily in the construction sector, and die.
Other questions for Gord? I know, Gord, you asked that question about how high it is. I did take a fall arrest safety course, and 4 feet if it's going to be a static or a fixed platform, and 10 feet if it's something that would be like a scaffold, that type of thing. So when you see as an example to the audience, at Home Depot or any place where they have a loading dock, that's 4 feet up, and so either the truck's up against there as a fall arrest or they close the door. So again, 4 feet. So when we think about, oh, I'm safe enough on top of my kitchen table, you're pretty close to that 4 feet. So
Yes.
sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but please introduce yourself and where you're from.
Thank you. My name's Vaughn Biebedorf, town of Kindersley, counselor there. I work in the oil field around Kindersley there, and rumor has it that the Saskatchewan government, or I'm not quite sure, but they're going to have like, I don't know, safety officers. I don't even know. The rumor is like about 50 of them to cover all of Saskatchewan. So basically any oil field guy without a hard hat on could be fined. Do you know anything about this, or?
Not specifically. One of our partners is WorkSafe Saskatchewan. So WorkSafe is a partnership between the Workers' Compensation Board and the Ministry of Labour Relations and Workplace Safety, the OH&S department.
Right.
My understanding is that they have hired more occupational health officers and that they will be sending those into the field. And you can expect to see a lot more of their presence.
Right.
I don't know specific sectors where they're going and what have they got targeted for sectors. But, when we take a look at one of the aspects of how we're going to end this pain and suffering is policing and regulations. That's one aspect. So, I applaud the ministry because really, I think we're behind other provinces in terms of our presence around OH&S.
Right. Since nobody else is up here, just a comment on some of your, I guess, figures or numbers on, say, the accidents or whatever. I can see a lot of the industrial injuries not being reported. Has that come into figuring why that number is so low? Some of the little nicks and, that's all hidden, and in my profession, we've seen that between areas. I'm in the Colville area, and there's another, and here one area is reporting everything, and the other one is hiding everything. So I'm not just, not believing some of the numbers, but some of them are tainted, in my opinion.
And that's a good comment, and there's validity to what you're saying. We know, I can't speak to this directly because I was with the Workers' Compensation Board up until about 2002 or 3, and we knew that there were companies who perhaps weren't properly reporting. But now what we're seeing more than ever before is that organizations, companies are starting to value injury prevention. And there are more and more investments that have been put into, particularly in the workplace. We have never had the level of investments in health and safety in the workplace as we do today. So it's starting to turn around. And I think as time goes on, we'll see fewer and fewer instances like you're saying, because they are real and they are happening, and we'll have more of that proper cultural support so that all injuries are reported. As a matter of fact, I've worked with safety specialists, and I'm not one, but they say a proper safety management system needs all kinds of reporting, particularly even before an injury happens, near-miss situations. You'll see when they start going down that road and investing in health and safety, all of the reports of the near misses go way up because people are starting to report them now. And those are helping to head off the path in terms of a potential of an injury, an actual injury, that could happen down the road. So that's a very good comment, and you're right on the money, but you know what? We are moving in the right direction. We really are. You're welcome.
Excellent. Any other questions for Gord? We've got one more here, please.
I'm from Foam Lake, Gloria Bastine. I would like to know if you take into consideration some of the hours that people put in at work. I'll take, for example, a nurse. My daughter was in the hospital. The nurse was on her 8th hour, and she's on 12-hour shift. She had come off of nights and was on days. And I learned all this within a few minutes. She was worried about children, she was exhausted, and she was tired. So if we're in the workplace like that, and then you go home, you're more likely to have more injuries?
Yes. Yes.
And so is that taken into consideration? Or when they expanded from 8 hours to 12, I don't think it was necessarily a good thing, but
No.
how do you feel on that?
Well, you're absolutely right. The root cause, researchers have indicated the root cause of most injuries are fatigue, rushing, complacency, fatigue, rushing, complacency. I've forgotten the last one, but fatigue, absolutely. And again, it's all that I've heard and read. I don't know specifically, but after a certain time, you know it yourself, after working at a job for 8 hours, you're going to get more and more tired. And the stress is going to be more and more, and the less you're going to be aware of your surroundings. And I believe researchers have indicated that the risk go up exponentially after a certain point in time. So you're absolutely right.
Okay.
And mind you, I mean, that's the infrastructure of the society that we live in now, right? So we have to start looking at ways to lessen the potential of an injury in a situation where there's a 12-hour shift. And that's where, for instance, we have right now the Saskatchewan Association for Safe Workplaces and Health that's working. It's a safety association that's dedicated to the healthcare industry, and it's working with all of the health regions, all 12, and then the 13th Athabasca, around bringing down the injury rates in the healthcare industry. So.
Okay. And can I just share a short story
Absolutely.
of an injury in a workplace? About 16 years ago, my niece fell off a platform into an auger and consequently lost her leg below the knee, and they actually had to grind it out to get her out of there, and she was still conscious when her dad got there. Why I'm sharing that, when you brought up about costs to the workplace, this involved workman's comp. They had to get her 3 prostheses for her leg. She was 26 years of age, and they eventually retrained her. What she does is go in and work with people that have been injured in the workplace. But it all could have been avoided if they had put all it needed was a small railing on the platform. And you can go back and read this story. It happened in the town of Elora in Ontario. The company, when the maintenance man said they needed this railing there, they laid him off 2 days without pay. Thank you.
You're welcome. That story and other stories like it are very powerful. Ideally, what we are seeing now more than ever before is that the solutions for protecting everybody in the workplace from an injury is often residing right with the front line. They will tell you what's needed, and they often will be able to engineer something for you. It's just the thing about the Saskatchewan Health and Safety Leadership Charter, we go back to that, I guess, 5th principle, is that we're asking our community and business leaders to say, hey, make that investment. Don't ask. Don't question it. because you will get exponential returns. So.
If
My
I
name
can,
is,
we only have about 14 minutes, so I just want to make sure we get all the questions in, because I do want the audience participation, but we also have other sessions starting right away. So if we can keep the questions short, the answers short, we should get more in, so give her.
Dennis Moore from Estevan, Saskatchewan. I don't recall you mentioning any number to the cost of not wearing seatbelts. And the reason I mention that, in our community, we maybe have a 2-day blitz. And in those 2 days, we will have 30, 40 upwards of people not wearing seatbelts today. On Friday last, 4 young guys, 20 years old, 24 years old, rolled a vehicle. None of the 4 had seatbelts on. The young chap, one of them is in Regina here on life support. The week before, a guy had a snowmobile accident. He's in here on life support. And the reason I bring it up is because even in this day and age, there are so many people not wearing seatbelts. I feel that that the RCMP and those road patrol people, we haven't finished the job yet. We've either got to get the costs up. Where I come from, money means nothing. If you get a $240 fine for a seatbelt, you pay it and you get back on the road and you do the same thing. We either have to pull their license or get that fine up to $1,000 so that somebody pays attention. I'd like to know if you have any resources to what it's costing us not having seatbelts on in this province.
No, I don't.
No.
I don't. But I do know that there are 3 aspects to preventing injuries. One is enforcement and how important that is. Another one is engineering proper safety equipment. And the third is education. And I think this is where we will see inroads when we start helping to educate our children and youth. Because in many instances, I mean, for us to change our habits at our age is a difficult thing. But I take a look at the recycling movement with our children and youth and how that's changed society. So this is it's a journey, right? And we'll see fewer and fewer of those instances as time moves forward, I'm sure.
Well, I enjoyed your program, and I think it's well worth the
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you. I stand corrected. We actually have a break after this, so we do have time if we do need to push a little bit further. But again, that's your trade show viewing time and a break that's at 2:30 scheduled. So, other questions for Gord? And coming from a province where we push hard and we like to drive long, and I remember how many times I'd show up and think, I can't remember making that corner. Anybody else ever done that? Get home and can't remember making one of the corners on the way home? I think we've all made those mistakes and have learned from them. But on behalf of the SUMA Board of Directors, I represent the communities over 30,000, and we want to say thank you, and from all the delegates, thank you very much, Gord, for sharing with us. On behalf of, for you, we've, as a board, provided you with a donation that goes towards the Mike Badham Scholarship Fund, and I've got that to present to you as well. So thank you very much, and if you can help me, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks again, Gord. Thank you, everyone, for coming out.
Oh, thanks, Wayne. Thank you. Thank you.
Can anybody sign this charter?
What we're looking to is we're
How'd everything go?
Yeah, it was excellent.